Good morning. Just give me a second. All right, guys. Good morning. How are you? Welcome to the awesome. Give me just a second. I'm gonna turn this down just a little bit more because it's like crazy loud. It feels like. There you go. Hi. Good morning. How are you?
Hello there.
Oh shit. Hey, Joy. Good morning. How are you guys today? It's reading time today. We're gonna read. We're gonna do all the things that we usually do when we read, like change our hat, get ready for the stream like we used to always do. We took a break doing it for a while because it's baseball season and all the other things, but we're trying to find ourselves again, find our groove, get back into being awesome together every day in more usual ways. I'm gonna put on I got my Book Daddy cup back today. Wait, I'm on time for once? You're early, buddy. We haven't even started the awesome yet. I'm just firing up. Had a really great show for you today. Lots of good stuff. We had the end of the season baseball party yesterday for all of Jack's team and the kids. There were so many kids this year that were great, that did great things. We had so many talented kids that came for the fall baseball little league season, and it really stood out to me how amazing a lot of these kids were, because I had just had the privilege of coaching the kids in the fall, or in the previous spring, and the spring kids had some issues. They were young. Some of them had never played baseball before. There was just this newness. So I had some kids that in the spring that I had some kids that were seasoned, but then a lot of kids that just hadn't played ball. And remember, we talked about struggling for all of the spring till just the end, when we started finally maybe winning a couple of games, and then the season ended. Hey, Sashi, good morning. See you at 10. Yeah, exactly. It was kind of like one of those things, And so then this season, the fall is when you really, really ask the parents to bring the kids that are like, you get two sets of kids in the fall. You get the kids that just love baseball and want to play it. They just consume baseball. That's what I want Jack to be like. That's how I was when I was a kid. And then you get the kids that you beg to come back in the off season because you just want to spend more time coaching them so they can be better for you when it matters. Because fall ball, there's no tournaments at the end. It is the rules are different. You don't pitch a kid a whole game, even if he can go a whole game. You pitch him 2 innings and then you have to swap him out. So we don't care about, pitch count. We don't care about, because you only play on the weekends, so days rest is fine. So it's you get 5 days of rest, as long as you're not throwing these kids at practice in the middle of the week. So it's kind of like that. And so we had a hell of a fall ball team this year. I think we won. I want to say we started with 17. I think we started with 16 or 17 games on the season. We canceled 3. The last 2 for weather and 1 before that for weather as well. So that's 14 games that we played. I want to say we probably won 10 of them, maybe 9 of them. So we had a really good team this year, and we got kids back that I wanted to see come back. So that was cool. We had a party. One of the kids on the team, his name is Logan. He's cute, awesome kid. He's probably he came to us from a travel ball team, and he played this fall, and he loved it and had such a good time that he told me he was going to come back and try to play for me again in the spring, and I'm so excited about that. I am also sad because I think Jack is going to move up into senior ball this year. If he doesn't make the high school team, he's going to move up. And that will be a team above some of these kids that I coached this year that their parents had really, really good times. They were like, God, I actually got some feedback from some of the parents yesterday that they said, when we had the opportunity to have our kids come and play for you last spring, we didn't know you. And we really wish that we had taken the opportunity to come and play then, because this season has been so great. Like, I think that Jimmy is hitting his stride on Reddit. Yeah, I know. That son of a bitch right there. Love that guy. Seriously, though. Overnight, instant rock star. I've been here trying to be a rock star. Well, I don't really want to be a rock star, but, I've been here trying to be, for all of this time. And here Jimmy just shows up with his 4 miles of yarn and literally just crushes it. I am grateful to be part of the grassroots crew that is propelling Jimmy to stardom. And I hope that my 15 minutes of fame will hopefully come on the loose fibers of yarn that he leaves in his dust as he propels himself to the millions of amazing things that he's going to do. We all have unique vibe. You'll find what speaks for you. I think that I already, have sort of found it. I'm just giving credit where it's due, because Jimmy 100% is just a fucking rock star. You want to say something about you, Kat, too. Thank you for seeing us at Worlds and being part of the awesome. Thank you for being in my picture. Thank you for coming to the dinner. You are a valued part of my community. And I was so grateful that so many people turned out for all of the things. And then just crazy that, like I said, I am so full of, I can't find the words. But it is so good because people in my community, friends of mine, friendships that I have fostered, people that I have supported and have said, go be your best you, have done things great and become their best or at least the best version that they could be today, and they're going to continue to try to grow and be better afterwards. And that is so amazing and humbling. Like, just to be able to be part of that. Like I said, I am not upset at all to say that Jimmy is the superstar right now. He deserves to be. Just killing it. 100%. I hope that I can kill it next year at Worlds. Dude, the whole community is great. And I cried. I got interviewed by Simon at Worlds, and he asked me to talk about community. And I think I talked to him for probably, I'm going to say, it may have been 2 or 3 minutes. But you guys know I can talk a long time. It might have been 15 minutes. All I know is at the end, I was in tears. I could not talk anymore. Because the community is the weapon. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Cat, come and find me. Your suit was amazing this year. And there were some things, all of your patterns and all of your stuff. I think there is a lot, and we can make you. I think that you can do it. You're awesome. That's the other thing that I love about this community. The other thing I love about this community is that I have, it won't fit by next year. I'm just saying that there's a lot of stuff. Hold on, I'm in the middle of ban. Get out of here! Get out of here, bots! We don't need you. I'm sad that I banned the bot. Anyway, all I'm saying is that you've got the ability to do really great seam work. You designed your whole suit yourself. It was accurate. I loved it, and it was great. And even Mike said that it was great, and we love all those things. It was really, really good, and yeah, and your gas bag was awesome too. That was a great maker's prop. Anyway, I think that come and find us. We can talk shop. We can bounce off of each other and do some things. And it's not a gas bag. You're Huragok. I know what it is. I was just giving you a hard time. I thought it was interesting how you came up with the ability to make that a thing, and then how you executed it, and it was amazing. Like I was awe-inspired. Like I thought that the sandwich was gonna win because it's the sandwich, and I was grateful that the Forge Lord posted like, if this doesn't get an honorable mention, I'm gonna turn this table over. Yeah, exactly. I mean, but still, I made the sandwich in like 3 or 4 days. I made most of the sandwich live on the Awesome with you guys one day. So it's just, like I said, it's amazing. Whatever. I was grateful for you to be there and finally get to meet you again for the second time at a Halo event. I got to hug you, and you got to I didn't recognize Fox between Friday and Saturday because of that darn wig. Oh, hey, thank you. I appreciate you. This is the heart for you always. And I have hugs and smiles and tears for you the next time I see you, I promise, okay? And my wife said she loved your glasses. All of the glasses that you wore all of the days. And you guys are like apparently some of like best buddies ever or something now. So, you should reach out to her maybe on the Discord. She's Lena of Lund with underscores. Or you might already have her on your thing. But you reach out to her. How is the shoulder? The shoulders feel great. Whatever happened. So I should get started reading soon, but we'll talk about this first. Whatever happened, I had done some stretching recently as well, and I had my wife like applying some pressure in some places that the physical therapist had worked with me and been like, you need to do these things to like loosen up things like your calves and stop Charlie horses and things like this. So as people like you who know more about bodies than me have stabbed me in all of the soft, squishy bits and allowed my body to, I guess, come off of the guard that it has been stuck in, it has only proven to me that I am weak and lame, and I need to go back to the gym and start pumping the iron again, so I can build myself back into the Spartan that I'm supposed to be, and not the Spartan that I pretend to be sometimes. Anyway, no, I feel great, thank you. I have not thrown a baseball, unfortunately, since Worlds, because the season has ended, and I do feel a dull ache in the lower right shoulder, just at the bottom, like far down here at the ribs, because I'm not exercising that motion, and so it's just sore. Other than that, feeling pretty good. We'll get it right. Yeah, no, 100%. I'm sure it is. It's, the physical therapist, I felt great when I was doing physical therapy every week, but once the VA took that away, it was pretty garbage, too. Yeah, anyway. But yeah, no, we can talk about more of that after we read. We got to keep the masses happy, and I know you all come here to listen to me read some stuff, so we're gonna do that. Give me a second. I'm fiddling with my pocket, my keys. I don't want to set the Bronco off. Music is courtesy Ambient Wonders. You guys want to know, that's Ambient Wonders on YouTube, supplied and provided by Insulation 00. He's a really great friend of ours. Go check him out. If you want to know more about him, you can put exclamation friends in the chat, or exclamation OST, which will give you a link to Ambient Wonders. This is the same song that we pretty much listen to behind all of the reading. But it's great. You can listen to it for anything. There's a bunch of different... It's all background music, mostly from video games. And if you like something that he doesn't have, you can send him a request in YouTube, and he might get to you and do the thing. So thanks, Martin, for that. And let's see... Just checking the numbers. 1,758 follows this morning on Twitch. Thank you, every single one of you, for being part of the awesome. We've got 83 subs. Thank you for the 5 gifted subs and his own sub yesterday. 1848 Strident Inspector coming in hot. It was great. Hey, go work. I'll read. We'll play later, buddy. Thanks for checking in. Stay awesome, friend. Here's the heart. Let's see. And we're at approximately 170 subs on YouTube. Just waiting for terminal velocity to happen. Patreon and all the things to come. Hopefully this year, in this new year, we'll have it all sorted out soon. With some big updates for you all to be part of. Like, share, and subscribe. Tell your friends. It's time to start reading. I'm going to go as long as I can. I don't know how long it'll be. Usually it's about 2 hours. We'll see today. Here's the bookmark. Dun, da, 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 shoo. Haha, all my Star Trek friends. You know. If you know, you know. If you're listening to this later and not watching the video, I hope you're not too confused about all the fun that we're having. Alright, here we go. Rubicon Protocol. We're on chapter 20. Redoubt of Sundering, Zeta Halo, February 8th, 2560, day 59. Lucas Browning had been in the holding cell for 6 days now, as it filled up with prisoners, some of whom he recognized from the mortal reverie. They were in all states, from the severely wounded and critically injured to those who'd escaped harm and were simply weak and starving. No one was afforded medical treatment, and it was impossible to administer care from within the cell. All he could do was offer a bit of comfort when the guards weren't looking. He learned early on to stay quiet and stop asking each new prisoner who had lived and who had died on the battlefield. Talking meant garnering the attention of the brutes. Garnering the attention meant beatings, and no one came back from the beatings. He spent most of the time in the corner, head down, trying to stay warm and ignoring the gnawing in his stomach. Day after day, not much changed. So he was stunned when the brute in charge of his block appeared and deactivated the translucent red energy barrier. Their jailer sneered, revealing stained fangs framed by even dirtier upper and lower tusks. He was short for a Jiralhanae, but wider than most, with meager armor and dark gray skin. He was lazy, too, spending most of his time outside the cell leaning against the supply crates and napping, stuffing his face, or getting in shoving matches with the jackals that came and went. "On your feet, vermin," he said in basic English. About 20 of them rose and began filing out of the cell. Those who couldn't stand were dragged out by the jailer's Kigyar underlings. Hunger made dizziness cloud his vision, and weakness threatened his balance. Once a day, Lucas had been fed a random meal of unidentifiable slop, or salvaged energy bars, or sometimes nothing at all, if there wasn't enough to go around, along with a canister of water, and he was feeling the effects now, as had the other prisoners were led. I'm going to read that one again. And he was feeling the effects now, as he and the other prisoners were led from the prefabricated base structure that housed the cell. The entire area was walled off by tall alloy barricades, and more structures dotted the uneven ground, serving many purposes: barracks, munitions depots, cells. In an open area, they were stopped. A cool breeze blew through the outpost, making Lucas close his eyes and appreciate the sensation on his skin and the freshness in his nostrils. After 6 days in the rank stale air of his cell, it was a welcome change. Though he couldn't see what was happening at the front of the line, he figured it must be some kind of inspection or interrogation. Every time the line moved, he'd see a brute drag a prisoner to the right and toss them into another holding cell. By the time Lucas made it to the front of the line, he was numb. Anticipation and fear should have had a tight grip on him, but after everything he'd been through, all he could muster was vague curiosity. He knew he should be scared, but there was only so much a body and a mind could take. At least that's what he thought as he stepped forward and lifted his gaze. His mouth went slack. Those dull emotions he'd been feeling, flaring bright now in his heart, broke into a million pieces. His mind stumbled over the sight, unable to process what he was seeing, unable to reconcile the immense betrayal. The one inspecting the prisoners was a human. "Strip," the inspector said, in a bored tone, barely glancing at Lucas. The man was in his mid-30s, tall, wearing a soiled white lab coat. His hair was long and straight, pulled back into a tail. His face was hard-angled, eyes cold and indifferent as they swept over Lucas. He gestured to one of the jackals flanking him. It stepped forward. Memories of vicious snapping jaws and hungry eyes flashed across his field of vision, making him recoil, but the jackal simply latched a claw onto his arm, digging in painfully and using his other hand to cut Lucas's clothes with blood-soaked knives. Horrified, Lucas snapped to and began struggling. "You can do it yourself, or they can do it for you," the inspector said, leaning casually against a stack of munitions crates at his back. How could he be so indifferent? Lucas expected this kind of detached coldness from the brutes and the elites, and the jackals and the grunts, but from a human. In his time spent at mortal revelry, he'd heard talk that while the Banished had once welcomed humans into their ranks, there was growing discontent ever since the Jiralhanae homeworld and its 2 populated moons had been completely obliterated by the rogue human AI Cortana. There had been reports that there was ongoing and sometimes lethal contention between many brute clans and the small number of humans within the Banished. That this one was here and working alongside the Jiralhanae told Lucas that he must have earned enough respect with the Banished hierarchy to avoid brute vengeance. The jackal approached him again with a knife, but Lucas shrugged him off as the sting of tears rose through his nasal passages and hit the back of his eyes. "I'll do it myself." There was something even more demoralizing than being cruelly disrobed by the banished. It was being stripped of his dignity in front of his own goddamn kind. But he did it anyway. Shaking all over, he pulled his shirt off and stepped out of his pants. He was checked for injuries, then told to redress. His shirt now torn, but at least his pants were in decent shape. His shoes, however, were taken. Occupation? The inspector asked. Screw you. His tears slid down his face. He doesn't have the physique of a soldier, the inspector noted to the jackals in Sangheili, ignoring the insult. Presumably, it hadn't been the first. Keep him. He's probably a scientist or a doctor. The trader stared at Lucas and smirked. It's your lucky day. Even though it went against his oath to do no harm, Lucas had never wanted to kill anyone in cold blood more than this man right now. He could only hope he'd get the chance at some later point. One of the jackals cackled in response to the inspector's remark. Lucas was taken to the left and up an embankment to another prefabricated holding cell overlooking the area. Dazed, he shuffled inside the empty cell and then turned around. There were 8 others left in line, and he watched with grief as they reacted to the inspector with the same emotion. Some enraged, screaming, lunging for him, and being beaten for their efforts, while others broke down completely, demoralized. Early on, he'd heard the brutes call this place the Redoubt of Sundering, a processing place for prisoners. Its definition might have sounded managerial in nature, but that didn't even come close to the truth. As the days wore on, Lucas witnessed exactly what processing meant. The redoubt was a place of culling, separating the soldiers and injured from the uninjured, eliminating the weak and the dying from the herd before the rest were sent nearby to a place called the Tower. No one but Lucas passed that day. From his vantage on the embankment, he had a decent view of the outpost and of the other prisoners now gathered in a cell across the open area. Maybe somewhere in the back of his exhausted mind, he already knew what their fate would be. He just wasn't prepared for the sight of their mass execution. The inspector and his companions left the area as a grunt wobbled into view, talking to itself as it passed the occupied cells that Lucas could see and casually tossed in a methane canister. The creatures never stopped walking or talking, just threw it in and carried on, leaving a noxious blue and green cloud to fill the cells, obscuring the prisoners. Lucas heard a few desperate screams, but they were cut short, replaced by the sounds of choking and coughing. But it was the red energy barrier that suddenly lit up with the outline of the bodies as they tried desperately to push through that sent him to his knees. It was over in just seconds, nothing left but silence, stillness, and the wafting stench of methane. That could just as easily have been him in there, and yet, despite what the inspector had noted, he really didn't feel so lucky. Every week or so now, countless more prisoners went through the line to be inspected and culled, while Lucas remained in his lofty cell overlooking the horrific spectacle. Hate and hopelessness festered inside of him, and he burned with rage. He saved lives, it was who he was, but he swore if he ever got out, ever had the opportunity, he'd kill the inspector first and foremost, and he'd enjoy it. Oh, would he freaking enjoy it. There were days when he wanted to scream, but he never did, and holding it in was just another kind of burn. At night, the burn gave way to the hellish replay of the mortal revelry's last stand, Gavin Joe's death, and Lucas's inability to save him, then or in the many opportunities presented in his dream state. He withdrew more and more into himself, so much that he found it difficult to look at or speak to the handful of other prisoners who had been also put into his cell. It was in the 3rd or 4th week, he wasn't quite sure anymore, that the brutes brought out the Spartans, 5 of them, dragged limp into the open area, either severely injured or dead already. It was impossible to tell, and they were certainly unable to fight back. But Lucas prayed for their quick and merciful demise as the brutes, jackals, and grunts set about dismantling their precious Mjolnir armor, ripping it off in the crudest, most damaging ways possible: manglers, plasma cutters, and brute force. And if the Spartans hadn't already been dead, then it happened sometimes during the dismantling. Afterwards, their bodies were pummeled, used as target practice, disgraced, defiled, and treated like trash. He thought he'd seen the worst of the Banished during the Battle of the Mortal Revelry. Instead, that was just a primer to the depths of their cruelty. He was quite certain now that the Banished had specifically chosen a human to process the prisoners. Being betrayed by one of your own kind was far more destructive to the psyche. It was psychological warfare at its finest. It probably wasn't even random that Lucas's holding cell overlooked the execution area. They were being demoralized to the point of compliance, and that was the entire point. The Banished weren't simply defeating their enemies in battle. Under Escherum's leadership, sophisticated tactics were employed to crush them mentally as well. Total domination. And it worked. By the time Lucas and the others were being loaded into the transport to the Banished long-term prison, the tower, emptiness filled the spaces where hope and promise used to dwell. It was so complete that he no longer had the waking, terrible flashbacks of the Reverie massacre and Gavin's death. Everything was muted, grayed out, and distant. He barely noticed the environment, more focused on watching his dirty bare feet move one in front of the other as he was shuffled along, outside and across the outpost, to the waiting transport. 2 low-ranking brutes, by the look of their armor, accompanied them. Such work, one of them grumbled, shoving Lucas forward and onto the transport vessel with open sides. And for what purpose? It was beneath us, the other agreed. Punishment, to be their caretakers, when we have done nothing to deserve it. Kill them all, I say. His partner glanced menacingly over his shoulder, and Lucas quickly cast his eyes downward and scrambled to sit in the center of the vessel with the others. Meeting a brute's gaze, he'd learned, was a challenge met with instant death. They'd die with barely a touch. The first Geralhani said with disgust, "We can hardly be expected to keep them alive long enough to make it to the tower. Fragile, are they not? Squeeze them too hard, step on them, hit them, and all they do is die. They're useless as fur lice." A Sangheili pilot started up the startup procedure, and in short order the transport lifted off. They hadn't even bothered putting restraints on the prisoners. So sure they were, if anyone attempted to escape, they wouldn't get very far. It almost felt like a dare, just another excuse to kill them if they made a break for it. Lucas tried not to think about it, about what life would be like at the tower. He kept his head down and let his weary mind rest until the transport eventually landed. The prisoners were ushered off the vessel and beneath the massive legs of the tower support beams. His instinct was to look around, but really, what was the point? One of the Geralhani shoved him from behind, and he went sprawling, landing on his knees and on his elbows. He was so tired of being pushed and shoved and handled that it brought tears to his eyes. "Get up!" A massive hand curled around the top of his head tightly and plucked him off of his feet. His neck muscles stretched, and something popped inside of his spine. "Idicus," a booming voice with an air of authority called from the open ground floor of the tower. The brute turned, but didn't release him. "Alive, remember." The brute cursed, holding Lucas directly in front of his face. The beast's breath was atrocious and made his stomach curl. He grinned, and then opened his hand wide, dropping Lucas like a stone. "Welcome to the tower, maggot." The tower was a menacingly large square keep held off of the ground by massive landing supports. Like most of the other Banished structures Lucas had seen, this must have been dropped into place by one of the Banished capital ships, allowing them to assemble and fortify it quickly. It had a central gravity lift and ramps around the inside perimeter leading to each level. The top level, he soon learned, was the domain of Chaklock, warden of the tower. While Lucas was a low-level prisoner, the day he arrived, he'd been taken to the top, shoved into a dirty, blood-stained chair in the middle of the room, bathed in red light, and questioned by the warden. The room had turned his stomach, the stench of blood and rot and excrement overwhelming and instilling an immediate panic. He expected to meet a vicious-looking Jiralhanae, but not a tall Sangheili in gleaming gold armor. But Chaklock was no less intimidating. The warden considered torture to be an art form, and as soon as he'd brought out the plasma cutters, Lucas fainted. The next thing he knew, he woke alone in an enclosed cell, still in one piece. Maybe passing out had been the one saving grace, but it wouldn't help him the next time. Hunger pains gripped his insides. Every couple of days, someone would come and toss some scraps and bones of some animal. None of it ever properly cooked. Occasionally, he got some kind of slop. It smelled horrible, making him curse with disgust. But the guy in the next cell heard and tapped on the wall. Lucas had moved over and let his head fall against their shared wall. "Just eat it," his neighbor was male with a deep voice and a kind tone. "It won't kill you." Lucas had scoffed at that. Too bad. His neighbor responded with a scratchy laugh, obviously relating to the sentiment. "Keep fighting, soldier. You never know when help will come." Tears had sprung to Lucas's eyes. "Help isn't coming. There's nothing left. We're all scattered and outnumbered." "What do you mean?" "After the battle at the Mortal Revelry." "You were there?" the stranger asked intently. "Was a bloodbath. The Banished, they outnumbered us 100-1. We didn't stand a chance. We never did." "And the Spartans?" "Fought like hell. Never seen anything like it." "I don't know. Saw a lot of them die. Have no idea how many. Me and my friends, we escaped with 2 of them." "Which 2? "Stone and Kovan." "Ah," the man remarked, then said a heavy sigh. "The Reverie is lost to us, then." "She's lost for over a month now. If the guy didn't know about Reverie, he must have been captured early on or picked up in another sector." Lucas's curiosity stirred. "Who are you?" So much time passed that Lucas wasn't sure if he'd get an answer at all, but finally the neighbor replied, "It's better if you don't know." Lucas slumped against the wall and pulled his knees to his chest, fairly certain that whoever was next to him had to be of significant rank for him to say such things. He let the answer lie, appreciating the protection his neighbor was trying to afford him. It made him think of the boat crew, of Murphy and Dimmick, Cam and Bender, and how they'd all looked out for each other from the moment they'd met. He missed them. He didn't want to. Hell, he didn't even want to remember them, because it hurt too much. Yet, he couldn't seem to help himself. And for once, he let his guard down and let his memories free. Where were they now? Dead? Alive? Imprisoned somewhere like him? Nah, they'd made it. They were out there right now, giving the Banished hell. He had to believe it. He needed something to hold on to, so he held on to that. It might be the only thing that keeps him going. Chapter 21. Zeta Halo, March 3rd, 2560, day 82. They came upon the abandoned forward operating base at dusk. The fob had been dropped in a good spot, tucked in a grove of pines with a rocky point at its back. The boat crew didn't talk much. After a month of surviving on their own, they knew the drill, making a sweep of the area, searching the prefabricated platforms for supplies. They'd found a few of these hastily established bases in the time since the aftermath of the Reverie. Some were even occupied by small squads like theirs, but reunions were brief. A day or a night at the most, sharing news and information and supplies, but always they moved on. They'd learned, as many others had, that smaller groups survived better and could evade more easily, hide quicker, achieve peak results. An ongoing leaderboard had been circulating by word of mouth. Unofficial squads kept track of kills and the chaos that they had engineered. Gravediggers, a ragtag unit of super-hardened ODSTs, had been extremely effective at taking out banished supply runners and raiding parties, while a group that called itself Hatriox successfully destroyed towers and bridges and other banished structures. Spartan Kovan was off scouting the area while Murphy took point like always. They developed a tidy sequence to their wanderings. Looks like the console is useless, he said, noticing the lump of melted alloy and circuitry. Cam, see if you can get anything from the comms unit. Dimmick, Bender, give me a hand with the Fallen. Murphy felt like he was always an autopilot these days, and this scenario was no different, gathering the dead, taking their tags, setting up camp, salvaging for supplies, remaining on high alert, rinse, and repeat. And he often wondered how long they would keep it up. According to the military calendar, today was the anniversary of the end of the Covenant War. On March 3rd, 2553, humanity had gathered at the final battle site on Earth to memorialize 3 decades of fighting, often with their backs against the wall, to a far superior enemy. And now, here they were 7 years later, still fighting, and still with their backs to the wall. For most of Murphy's life, humanity had been struggling against some kind of existential threat, one after another. Some things apparently never change. Bender pulled his scarf over his nose, coughing, and letting out a small gag. Looks like these guys have been like this for a while. Yeah, so let's stop talking and get this done quickly, Dimmick said. They collected tags and then grabbed wrists, dragging the corpses across the hard ground to a place behind some rocks. It would have to do. Cam was rooting through burned supply crates when they returned, but Murphy would be surprised if the ensign found anything useful. The place had seen some heavy combat. Too damaged, even for the banished to set up shop. This is a bust, Cam muttered, disappointedly. No ammo, munitions, rations, nothing. Murphy jumped onto the platform and took a seat near the crates, unwinding his scarf and giving his beard a good scratch before bending over to untie the laces in his boots. The soles had begun to separate, and the combination of wet and dry conditions as they stayed on the move constantly kept his feet damp and blistered. As he started to peel the socks off of his feet, a couple of loud thuds hit the platform. A pair of combat boots lay on the surface. Dimmick, standing on the other side, with a lift to her brow that said, "Don't even," she tossed a pair of socks on top. She'd been tough before, but had grown even more hardened and adept over the past few weeks on the run. Murphy even thought she'd make a damn fine Spartan recruit. Bender, too. She made a gimme motion with her outstretched hand. Come on, hand them over. A deep sigh escaped him. The idea of wearing a dead soldier's boots had prevented him from scavenging new ones until now, but he knew that it was time. He picked up the old footwear and slung them across the platform. Thank you. About damn time. She grabbed the offending boots, walked to the edge of the camp, and flung them as far as she could. Cameron moved on to the fob standard comms antenna on his knees to better reach the access panel. Eventually, the familiar sound of static filled the air, and others gathered around the platform as the engine tried to tune in. Short-range communications were all they were able to utilize, and those had been used sparingly on the occasion that they broke through the banished disruptors. Unfortunately, what came through as Cam's search frequencies was far from useful. As soon as the familiar voice whined through the speakers, they collectively rolled their eyes. Not this asshole again, Bender said. The grunt, calling himself Glibnub, broadcast daily from comm towers all over Zeta Halo, selling banished propaganda designed to demoralize any human survivors who might be listening. And he enjoyed his job tremendously. Even the banished were paying attention, relishing the broadcasts as though it were an old-time favorite. Do you ever wake up in the morning and think today is going to be a better day? The Ungoy's nasally voice went dead silent for several seconds before bursting out in a long, annoying laugh that went on and on until he was out of breath. Yeah, I didn't think so. Can't believe no one put a bullet in his head yet, Dimmick said, shaking her head. Whoever did would immediately get to the top of the leaderboard, as well as holding bragging rights forever. It was something they all talked about when meeting other groups and sharing intelligence. One of their most wanted was the irritating Glibnub, holed up somewhere deep in banished territory. Now this one's for all of you lovers out there, the grunt said, taking on the affectation of a late-night Waypoint host. Private First Class Owens, a certain gunnery sergeant, didn't finish filling out his UNSC personal relationship request. Apparently humans need permission to mate. Who knew it? Ha ha ha. I have news for you, pal. Request is denied. Can't mate when you're dead. Turn it off, Murphy said, MRE in hand. As the group ate, Cam continued to cycle through the channels. After a while, he caught a few spotty words. He leaned closer, frowning, but listening. What is it? Kovan asked, returning to camp. Broad channel message on repeat, and pretty spotty. Let me see if I can get it to clear up a bit. Okay, this sounds as good as it's going to get. As Murphy continued eating, the message played, and he sat up, straighter. He knew that confident voice. Sounded a hell of a lot like Spartan Sorrel. All UNSC forces per Rubicon Protocol has been initiated. Must do whatever necessary. Out of banished hands. Rubicon Protocol, Dimmick asked. What is that? Asset denial. It means we do whatever is necessary to keep control of Zeta Halo. Or keep control out of Escherum's hands. Kovan removed her helmet and set it on an empty supply crate. The Rubicon Protocol means we don't need permission, don't have to wait around for orders. We've been given free rein, permission to act, to do whatever is needed, wherever, whenever we can. Murphy nodded. So we don't just survive, we make life a living hell for the banished. If that means armed conflict, or poisoning their water supply, or blowing a munitions site, we do it. Every and any chance we get. Guerrilla warfare, Bender said. So basically, what we and a bunch of us have already been doing for the last month, Cam said, unimpressed. Murphy gave a soft laugh. At that, they'd certainly been a thorn in the banished side, however small. We're the last line of defense. The ring is repairing itself. We know that. We've seen it. And once it's operational again, there's no way in hell we can let the banished control a weapon like this. Just what kind of weapon are we talking about exactly? Dimmick asked. Kovan glanced around the group. If the Halo ring fires, it wipes out all sentient life within a 25,000 light-year radius. And when its pulse reaches the other rings, it could erase all thinking life from the galaxy. Dimmick's eyes went wide. Come again? Bender leaned forward, looking just as shocked. Jesus, no wonder they're after it. I think it's more than that, though, Kovan said thoughtfully. The ring isn't just a weapon. It's a habitat, and not a bad one. At that, because of Cortana, the Jiralhanae lost their homeworld and both of their moon colonies. They're looking to make this their home, you think? Dimmick asked. Kovan shrugged. It's what I would do. Whether they came here for the reason, or they were after, whether they came here for that reason, or they were after Cortana for payback, making Zeta a highly defensible outpost and getting their revenge all in one go, how could they resist? If that's true, then it makes our job even harder, Murphy said. They'll dig in and fight at all costs to keep the ring. You guys realize with the Rubicon Protocol in effect, it means we're on our own, Cam said. It means help isn't coming. We are the help. Murphy had silently hoped differently, of course. If they could gain a foothold, find a little luck, and then maybe, just maybe, fortune would smile on humanity's side, and help would indeed come. They just needed to hold out. However you look at it, we can either give up, or we can go all in and give the Banish hell, Kovan said. And I know damn well which one I'm going to choose. Me too, Dimmick replied, all in. Murphy watched each of them answer in kind, no question, no hesitation, until they were all staring at him, waiting. All in didn't just mean they'd give it their best shot. That was a given. It meant they understood how enormous the stakes were, and were still willing to give everything, including their lives. It didn't get any more humbling than that. They were crazy, in all of the best ways possible, and he most definitely could relate. After a deep exhale, he gave a nonchalant shrug and a lopsided grin. All in. Chapter 22. Zeta Halo, March 4, 2560, Day 83. Spartan Thomas Horvath had laid unconscious for several days now, on the edge of the mud flats, after Gorian ripped the near-fatal metal shard from his side. After he woke, he stayed another week or so, his biomonitors inducing a semi-comatose state, slowing down his brain function, metabolism, core temperature, and circulatory systems, while the medical systems within the armor engaged in the regeneration of his torn insides. Once he was able to stand, he'd been on the move, albeit slowly at first, sticking to the shadows and feeling real hunger for the first time in a long while. And surely because of it, those emergency high-caloric nutrient supplements fed directly into his system during the healing process had been the barest minimum to keep him alive. It was enough to get him across the kilometers of mud flats and to more familiar landscapes, but it sure as hell wasn't filling. In the weeks that followed, his strength returned, and he became adept at hunting the area's population of stripped gophers and land birds for food, and finding abundant water sources in the lowlands. Thanks to the Banished, no doubt, some of the larger fauna on Zeta Halo had been eradicated from this part of the ring, effectively hunted to the point of extinction. This was the Banished modus operandi: indiscriminately ravage a location's resources until it was bare and then move on. For the time being, he'd have to make do with the smaller game. He definitely landed off target of where he had originally intended, but he still counted it as a success that he'd made it across open space, and all was a miracle at all. Now the challenge, once again, was finding a way back to the UNSC presence, and at every opportunity he took out the Banished, becoming somewhat detached after a while, a lone wolf hunting the enemy, picking his targets, stalking, taking them down one by one, and then disappearing. He was smoke and shadow. They never saw him coming, and never left anyone alive to see him leaving. All the while, he stayed on the move, and with Fee's help, sought the location he'd discovered in the Phantom Flight recorder. He often referred to the data he'd stolen from the crashed vessel, trying to get a lock on position, using the landscape, building his own map, looking for ruins from which the Banished had extracted the stone artifacts. It was the only known location he had to go on, and he was certain it'd bring him back to the Banished, and he'd hoped the UNSC's main playing field. After so much time searching, he'd finally found it on the edge of a flooded plain populated with a series of tall, connected mesas. It was the site of intense destruction. The once dry plain evidently had been splintered by the initial ring fractures, using the ground to drop dramatically in places, leaving the mesas behind and allowing the water from a higher elevation, like a drain, into the depression. The weather over the plain was tumultuous. Storm clouds appeared to be stuck in perpetual patterns of rotation, producing harsh wind and churning the water below. Horvath bent his head against the wind and made his way across the narrow strip of land connected to the first mesa, where the vegetation and sparse trees eventually gave way to stones and mud brick foundations, and the ruins of several large stone rings partially buried in the ground. Sure as hell similar to the artifacts he'd found in the Phantom. Let me guess, nothing in the database. That's correct, Elfie answered. And no sign of the Banished. The area had been harshly excavated. No sign of the banished. The area had been harshly excavated. Pits of turned earth and stone, evidence of their occupation lying discarded among the ruins. Empty crates, spent shells, campsite trash, and even abandoned excavation tools were left behind. Horvath had no idea what he was looking for, so he walked the large site in a grid pattern, fighting the wind and the small sporadic dust funnels that formed and withered, until he found a deep pit where one steep side revealed unearthed walls of an ancient building. Following a sloping section down into the pit, he noticed depressions in the path. They were definitely made by an excavator. From the bottom of the pit, the facade of the ancient building rose 3 levels, its peak well over 10 meters above him. He regarded it for a long moment. The precisely stacked stone blocks, the window openings, the ornate archways, each one, and the crudely smashed opening at the center of the facade. The banished obviously weren't interested in preserving the site. Well, let's see if we can figure out what they were after. Horvath stepped over the rubble and into the dark, cavernous space. His light activated, illuminating a stone floor with a few remaining pieces of floral mosaics decorating the edges. The wind from outside echoed in the space, creating a hollow and mournful sound. At the far end of the chamber was another crude hole, a shaft large enough for a Geralhan eye, extending downward. Horvath ducked inside, moving into the bedrock, finally emerging a level below into a series of rock-cut chambers, littered with excavation debris. I'm detecting a faint life signature, Elfie said. It is human. Horvath paused in mid-step, a stunned breath caught in his throat. He hadn't seen another human being since Zeta Halo had fractured. Are you sure? I'm positive. His display lit with a grid of the chambers, and a green dot marked the spot. Each step sounded loud in the cavernous space, and his helmet lamp illuminated only a small portion of the area. As hope carried him closer to the dot, he cleared the grid from his display. As an unrecognizable heap tucked against the wall came into view, it was either another sensor going to hell, or it really was a human. And a living one at that. His hope faded as he approached and knelt, removing his helmet and immediately regretting it. The horrific smell of human rot stung the back of his nose and stuck in his throat. His helmet light stayed on, providing a means to inspect the mass of matted hair and what looked like a bony shoulder. He reached out gently, pulling the figure over. His heart gave a painful bang. It was a woman, her skin sunken, paper thin, and bruised in some places. Old, open wounds had festered. She wore a nondescript black operative suit, stiff with dried blood. Both legs had been broken and set at odd angles, and 3 fingers on her left hand were missing. Her wounds were in such varying stages that it was clear she'd been tortured over a long period of time, and then the banished just left her here to die. He ran a hand down his beard, letting out a heavy sigh that someone had endured this and still lived. His scanners weren't necessary to tell him that she was at death's door and there was no coming back from it. Her eyes moved beneath the lids as a faint moan lodged in her throat. I'm not going to hurt you, the Spartan Thomas Horvath of UNSC Infinity. You're safe. You're safe now. Her right arm lifted. Horvath reached out and grabbed her flailing hand. Surprised by her grip, he could sense her desire to communicate and moved her as gently as he could so that she was propped up somewhat. Her breathing was labored as she sought enough strength to talk. I'm Oni, Asset Recovery. Came here on the 2nd exploratory expedition 2 years ago. So she'd been here long before the Banished came, since the first expedition in 2555. Zeta Halo had been home to a few thousand military and science personnel. And surely others were still here, hiding, surviving, fighting. Oni asset recovery teams were highly skilled combat specialists, trained to navigate and survive in any number of hostile territories and environments, while hunting the highest value assets, a quarry that often included ancient Forerunner relics. They were badass through and through, and seeing one brought so low filled him with anger. The banished, the ones called Jaga, Gorian, they, and the mention of a name he knew well, Horvath clenched his teeth and had to keep from tightening his hold on the agent's hand. Didn't surprise him, though, as it was Gorian's intel and his phantoms full of artifacts that had led him here. Captured me months ago, stole my research. He should have killed the bastard the moment the Sentinel regained power. Been to one side after another and back again, finally dumped me here. But I know where he's going next. She released Horvath's hand and pointed to the cave wall beside her, where she'd been curled up. It's there. The way to one of the Conspectus network hubs. They'll go there next for answers. Why there? Answers to what? It's a data storehouse. It contains system protocols and records of all activity on Zeta Halo. Status reports, event logs, maintenance communications. She paused to catch her breath. Even access to its defense system. It's all stored in local information hubs throughout the ring. There's so much more to this Halo. So much we still don't understand. Her eyes rolled back into her head. Hang in there, he said softly, hoping she could hear him. He sat with her for a very long time until finally she gathered enough strength to speak once more. Do whatever it takes. Don't let the banished find the data. She was fading again, but managed to lift her right hand and slap it against the cave wall, as though that explained everything. A tear slipped from her swollen eye. She'd been sent by the Office of Naval Intelligence to Zeta Halo in order to retrieve Forerunner artifacts of critical importance. And she'd found something else, something the banished were now after too. Horvath, her throat worked, and another tear slipped out. I'm sorry to ask. Her head tipped to the side so she could see him more clearly. Perhaps some small part of him knew she'd ask even before she'd said it. He would do the same if her roles were reversed. Yet, when it came down to it, he wasn't sure if he could grant her request. He shook his head, unable to form an adequate reply, but she kept looking at him, pleading without words, letting her hopes sink into him, and through all of this, doubts and denials. They've already killed me, she said, reading his thoughts. His head hung. No, give me your weapon then, goddammit. Horvath hesitated, gritting his teeth in denial. He was supposed to save people, not provide them with a way out. Yet how could he just walk away and allow her agony and suffering to continue? He could not grant her this mercy. Being an Oni operative, she wore no name tag on her clothes or gear, no dog tag to identify her. In any other instance, if he'd asked an operative in the field for a name, the agent would laugh in his face and ask him if he'd failed basic training. But this circumstance was quite different, and if he was going to help her, then he damn well wanted to know who she was. You got a name? He asked gruffly, withdrawing one of the M6s from a mag clamp on his side, checking the magazine and the chamber, and then cradling her right hand. He placed the gun in it and guided her fingers around the grip. Jaeger, she strained. How about a real one? Horvath knew an Oni code name when he heard one, and he refused to let it be her last identity. A small smile pulled one corner of her wounded mouth. Stalling. Kate stalling. She tried to lift her arm. But the gun was too heavy to manage. So he helped her until her arm rested on her chest, the barrel pointing towards her chin. Thank you, she whispered with relief. Leave it to me. I'll wait until you're gone. Horvath met Stalling's glassy eyes and gave her a deep nod, marveling at the strength and fortitude, and then grabbed his helmet and left the chamber. He climbed out the same way he'd come in, hearing the howl of the wind before he saw daylight spilling down the shaft. The sound pricked the hairs in the back of his neck as he cleared the main chamber and stepped out into the pit. Every second that passed, every step he made or breath he took might be punctuated by the crack of the M6. He tried not to think about it or wait for it, and instead walked up the slope and headed through the strange stone rings and ruins to the edge of the mesa. The wind whipped at his hair and left a cold sting on his face. Thunder echoed from the dark storm cloud above, and the waves below crashed against the mesa walls. He stared at the tumultuous view for such a long time that when the gunshot finally rang out, it startled him enough to make him flinch. The birds in the nearby trees took flight, soaring to safer foliage as the finality of the violent noise rang through his head. Horvath sat, letting his legs dangle over the edge of his position and allowing his posture to relax. That final awful sound, one he'd heard so many times in his life, tried to bore its way inside of him and make him think not of Kate Stalling, but all of those others that he had lost along the way. Those more recently on Infinity, and those he could no longer reach. His team, his fellow Spartans, even his heroes, like the Master Chief. Blue Team had been on Infinity. Were they still up there? Or had they found themselves in the thick of things down here on the ring as well? Was the Master Chief even now finding his way through the banished ranks and laying the groundwork for victory? Or had he met a far worse fate? Horvath gazed out over the water and beyond the spinning supercell cloud that had hovered over the mesa, to the clear horizon and the faint glimpse of the ring curving upward beyond. The area was so vast, thousands upon thousands of acres broken into pieces, every one impossibly scattered. Some days it felt like he was taking 2 steps forward and 1 step back, but now Stalling had given him more hope. If there was an information hub with every event recorded, every status logged, that meant the slipspace event would have been logged as well. Where they'd ended up in the galaxy would be noted, and if he could find coordinates to get the message out, to let the UNSC know what had happened to Infinity and what was happening here on the ring, then reinforcements would be inbound, and the Banished would finally experience the full retribution they deserved. Sounded great in theory, but the Banished had a huge head start and the aerial vehicles at their disposal. They might already have the critical information they sought. Not one to dwell on the obstacles for too long, Horvath rose to his feet and made his way back down to the chamber, where he carefully moved Stalling's broken body and inspected the crudely scratched symbols and the map she'd made on the wall. He recorded the images. See what you can make of this map, he told Fee, and then used a nearby rock to scratch out its existence. That done, he gathered the Oni agent in his arms and easily carried her back to the surface, where he buried her in a spot overlooking the water. He'd find the Conspectus hub, Stalling mentioned, and make sure that the sacrifice was not in vain. The map would keep him on a trail of Gorian, and more than anything, Horvath wanted the brute's blood on his hands. Chapter 23. Ungoi Pit, Zeta Halo, April 15, 2560, Day 125. Bender, you got eyes on them? Murphy's low voice buzzed through the team's salvaged comms. Spartan Kovan magnified by 5, meticulously scanning the target area from 18 meters above the ground in an ancient evergreen tree. As she unslung the SRS-99 S5 sniper rifle, she left one leg hang over the thick tree limb, drew up the other, and then rested her rifle her rifle-bearing forearm on her knee and added some stability. She cocked her head in a stance that was as natural as breathing and sighted through the S5 standard scope, once again wishing she hadn't had to ditch her custom sniper rig, Abby Lime, during the attack on the Mortal Revelry. This weapon she'd picked up a few weeks ago from the edge of the blackened-out missile crater, a lucky find, but it didn't compare. "I've got nothing," Bender replied. "Kovan," Murphy asked, "you see them yet?" Cam and Dimmick hadn't reappeared from setting the salvaged C-10 charges along the perimeter of the biggest Ungoi camp they'd come across to date. The area had 2 portable atmosphere pits in the size of heavy scarabs. Dug into the ground and fed by cylindrical methane tanks, the pits were covered by white, reinforced tents and airlocks to prevent leakage and provide access in and out enclosures. They were designed to mimic the Ungoi's natural atmosphere, a place where they could ditch their portable methane tanks and move freely without asphyxiating in Zeta Halo's oxygen-rich environment. All that methane just waiting to blow up sky high. Naturally, it made the perfect target. Movement near the trees caught her eye. They're coming southeast along the tree line. Cam and Dimmick were hauling ass back to the cover of the rocks. Should be in firing range in 5 seconds. As soon as they hit comms range, Murphy made contact. "Hurry it up, you two are running out of time." Soon, the large detachment of grunts relaxing in the pits would be replaced by another incoming unit. For 3 days, they'd watched this routine, and it was now just a matter of time. 2 birds, 1 stone. Multitasking was something she and Murphy had in common, and when it made them a pretty effective team, and it did make them a pretty effective team. Though, to be fair, there was no one more skilled at this than Bonita Stone. Kovan shoved the thought of her missing teammate away. They'd been good at so many things, yet reuniting didn't seem to be one of them. She hadn't seen or heard from Stone since fleeing the Mortal Revelry. "In position," Cam said between breaths. "Once this thing blows, remember the plan," Murphy said. Blowing stuff up wasn't the part that worried her. It was what came after. When she and Murphy had devised their latest raid, making the decision to hunker in place instead of running like the Banished would expect them to do, had been the smartest tack to take. It still was, but it was risky. With the Grunts' playground only a click away from the heavily guarded Banished armory, there had been little choice. Blowing up the camp and then running, scattering, and potentially being chased down by highly armed enemy guards was tantamount to suicide, so the decision had been made to not give the Banished a target at all. They'd strike, then conceal themselves close to the site and in the foxholes they'd been digging beneath the rocks over the last 3 days, and wait until the dust had settled. After that, they'd hike out and head northeast. Kovan spied the exchange unit waddling through the pass in a cloud of methane. "Look sharp, they're here." 30 grunts passed through the heavily guarded barricade and approached the pits. Just a few more meters to go, Kovan settled her thoughts and relaxed her body. The detachment separated in 2 groups and came to a halt at the pit's airlocks. There was a good chance Kovan's round would ignite the methane by hitting something metal inside and creating a spark. But no point in taking chances. If they were going to risk their lives, they'd make damn sure the campsite lit up like the sky. If the last couple of months had taught them anything, it was to make the most of every opportunity and wreak as much havoc as possible. Maximum damage all the time. Taking the shot in 3. Slow exhale out. And now, Murphy whispered into the comms. Kovan's high-velocity armor-piercing round cracked through the air and pierced one incoming grunt's methane tank. Just as he was about to enter the tent, the HVAP round continued straight through the tank and sliced into the first tent as the C-10 explosive charges blew the second tent. The whole damn campsite went up into an ear-splitting whoosh. The ground shook and the trees rattled, sending birds scattering from their branches. The sky turned dark as a fiery plume of methane mushroomed into the air. "Kovan, get the hell out of there," Murphy said. "See the rest of you this time tomorrow." Kovan waited until the team signed off, Then she climbed down the tree, her right leg feeling a little stiff again, jumping the last 7 meters and then taking off in a dead run toward the banished armory. Keeping an eye on their movements was critical. Bits and pieces of the Ungoi camp rained down through the trees now, streaming methane clumps splattering onto the forest floor. The forest had become her cover of choice. Ancient thick evergreens, some as tall as 10 stories, provided excellent cover and vantage points as they populated this part of the ring in large tracts, interspersed with arid mountain terrain. Kovan reached her second bird's eye location and climbed to a limb 20 meters above the armory, where she had a clear view of it and its well-protected fabricated walls, patrolled by brutes along with a small group of elite mercenaries. There was just enough time to get settled before the banished guards at the armory mobilized and exited the barricades, piloting a couple of the choppers, and 7 ghosts by her count. From her position, they looked like red insects spilling through the woods. She kept her eyes on their passage as they made it to the Ungoi pit. After realizing there was nothing left at the Grunt campsite, they split into 4 groups to search the outward sector patterns. The boat crew would already have retreated into their dugouts beneath the large boulders surrounding the Grunt's campsite. No comms, no signals of any kind to give them away. They'd lie low for at least 24 hours. Then, if all was well, Kovan would make contact. If it was safe to travel, they'd meet up and head out. If not, they'd wait another 24 hours and then try again. There was enough food and water for each of them to last several days, and they definitely learned how to make it in a stretch, all knowing immediately what it was like to go hungry. Intimately what it was like to go hungry. Their bodies, these last few months becoming lithe and strong and capable of existing on less as a result. Being a Spartan for nearly a decade, Kovan had forgotten what it was like to be vulnerable, to be without the resources of the military at comms call, without augmentations and billions of credits in hardware at one's disposal. Seeing her companions persevere was nothing short of heroic and inspiring. On the days when her bodysuit's density regulator went on the fritz and the suit tightened painfully around her leg and arm, it kept her going. They kept her going. But she knew she was on borrowed time. The next time the suit froze up, it might be the last. Stuck in the Gen 3, unable to get out. Wasn't something she wanted to think too much about. All she needed was a replacement chip to the core mechanism that controlled her regulator and someone to help her install it. But so far, finding the replacement had not been in the cards. It was wait or else ditch the armor altogether, and she wasn't quite ready to give up the Mjolnir just yet. Ammo was running low too. Once they start north, they'd have to make a few salvage runs and see what was out there. The guards continued moving away from the campsite, and she suspected it wouldn't be long before they gave up the search entirely. So far, the plan was working beautifully. Her gaze continued over the landscape and beyond the dispersing smoke clouds, and over the foothills, to the fractured cliffs in the mountains, and the empty sea, to the ever-curving shape of the halo ring with its hues resembling the surfaces of thriving blue-green worlds. It made her wonder if somewhere else on the ring her team was seeing a similar view. Stone was somewhere in this sector. She had to be. And the others were together, she hoped, surviving, doing their best, like everyone else. At every fob they'd stumbled upon, Kovan had left a report of their actions, anticipating the same or maybe a message. Just once to hear their names in a report or a fractured transmission, but she never did. With a tired sigh, she leaned against the tree trunk to settle in for the long wait. Daylight was now beginning to fade. Night would soon fall, and she'd still be there, waiting, watching, always watching. Through the night, the banished guards made several forays through the area before finally giving up and returning to the armory. They never bothered searching on the doorstep of the explosion site. 24 hours later, she made contact with Murphy, and they moved on. Chapter 24. Zeta Halo, April 18, 2560, Day 128. Since fleeing the site of mortal revelry, Spartan Kovan and the boat crew had gone southwest. Then east across the ring fragments, using the ship as their north star to orient their direction of travel. At first, the track they'd taken had been a means of survival. Once the Rubicon Protocol had been enacted, it had been determined by whatever banished location or groups they'd come across. They'd had several banished aerial positions heading in a northerly direction in recent weeks, so that became the new direction of choice. Kovan stayed 20 meters above the crew on the rocky slope, tracking parallel and gaining a better vantage, while the others took the easier path up in the mountains. Sometimes their laughter would carry with the wind, and for an odd moment or two, she longed to be part of their banter. It made her miss the companionship she'd had on Infinity. The Spartan deck was always a lively place. The fact that it might not exist anymore, even now, after all of this time, it felt unreal. Along with the Spartan losses, the loss of Gavin Joe and Lucas Browning continued to weigh heavy on her shoulders, and despite going over their deaths in her head 1,000 times, she'd come to the conclusion that she'd failed them. More often than not, it was because of them that she maintained her distance from the group, knowing another loss would hit her so hard. Kovan heard the Banshees 3 clicks off, and they were coming in fast. "Take cover," Kovan told the team over the standard issue infantry squad comms Cam had salvaged weeks earlier, rudimentary compared to the Gen 3 comm suite she'd once been able to utilize. Instantly, Murphy, Bender, Cam, and Dimmick scattered and hid as a unit of banished craft soared over the mountains. When they were gone, Kovan gave the all clear. "That's the 4th flight today," Murphy said, all heading in the same direction. The team picked up their pace, and after a few hours of hard hiking, they made it to a higher elevation where the air was much cooler and the trees thinned out. The terrain became flatter, too, as they trekked across the plateau, pocked with small canyons and valleys, and a few thin ring fractures that left deep chasms of exposed forerunner structure inside. As dusk gave way to night, they stopped to make a camp in a protected canyon, and Kovan hiked down to rejoin the group. They were sitting down eating when she arrived, giving her a few glances and nods of greeting, but more interested in the food. She couldn't blame them. Her stomach growled as she took a seat on one of the rocks. "What's the ration status?" she asked Murphy, as he picked through his rucksack and tossed her an MRE. "We'll run out in 2 or 3 more days." "I saw a deer in the woods below us," Bender said, stuffing his mouth with a nondescript, rather pathetic-looking sandwich. When no one replied, he said, "We're going to have to use fire sooner or later." True, but no one wanted to debate it yet. Or again. And no one wanted to bring the banished down on their heads with a campfire either. Feeding themselves would eventually mean putting themselves in danger, and one imperative would win out over the other. Cam's head lifted. "Shit. Is that another transport?" "Scatter," Kovan said, jumping up. This time, it wasn't just a small unit or a couple of light vessels, but an entire force. Several Banshees, Spirits, and a couple of heavily armed Phantoms crossed the darkening sky and trembled the loose stones beneath their feet. After they passed, Dimmick got up and walked to the edge of the camp. "There's more down in the valley." In the pass below, grounded vehicles followed a similar direction as the aerial vehicles, kicking up the dust as they went. Bender joined to watch the procession. "What the hell? We haven't seen movement like this since the Reverie." "Only thing north that we know of is the Reverie," Cam said quietly. "And they hadn't been back to that area since the initial attack." "Hold that thought." Kovan snagged her helmet and then made tracks across the plateau and up the rugged mountain slope so she could get a look out over the landscape. By the time she reached the high set of boulders and climbed to the top, her breathing was labored. She walked out onto a large rocky promontory and magnified her visor on the tail end of the aerial group. Cam was right. The Banished continued due north and seemed to be heading back to the Mortal Reverie's location, or at least somewhere close to it. When she returned to the camp, the others were already packed up and waiting with game faces on. "We'll stick to the high ground for the time being," she said. "Let's go." Another couple of days of travel, and Kovan found a nice spot to recon the surrounding mountains while the others were making camp. The time she was hunkered in between two boulders using the scope on her S5 to survey the area. While she'd never been in this location before, the terrain was starting to become more familiar, more woodsy, and more green. Occasionally, she came across burned-out banished vehicles and evidence of older ground fighting. And then she hit on a smudge in the trees across the ravine 2 clicks away. Kovan froze. Backtracking. There it was again. She magnified by 8 and realized she was looking down her scope and straight into another. Sniper to sniper, Spartan to Spartan. A slow smile grew on her face. Goddamn, she'd recognize that visor anywhere. Kovan kept Bonita Stone in sight and raised a hand. Stone did the same, and then made a gesture to tell her to stay put. Kovan acknowledged and stepped backward until hitting one of the massive boulders behind her. She removed her helmet and gulped in the fresh alpine air. Pure relief now washing over her, so hard that her throat went a little tight and her eyes stung. Stone was alive. Miraculous, considering how many of her fellow Spartans had fallen to the banished since they'd arrived on this hellhole. It would take Stone an hour or two to traverse the gulf between them, so Kovan returned to check on the team before making her way back to the rendezvous point once more. For now, she kept Stone's reemergence to herself, partly out of habit. It was ingrained in her, as a member of Fireteam Shadow, to hold things close to her chest, but mostly because she wanted to debrief in private. The reunion with the others could come later. Finally, she heard the Spartans' noisy approach, and she climbed on to the outcrop. They stared at each other for a good long moment, and then Stone removed her helmet. Stone's dark eyes were filled with relief. A wide grin was parked on her face, and her head was shaking, like she just couldn't believe what she was seeing. Beyond the welcome, though, Kovan didn't miss the gaunt quality of her skin. The shadows beneath her eyes, the busted lip, and the blood crusted in the ear. Her dark hair had grown into her eyes long enough to tuck it behind her ears. It made her look softer, an observation that, had Kovan voiced it aloud, would have gotten a swift ass-kicking. "Sure is good to see you again," Stone said. Kovan cleared the lump in her throat. "Yeah, same. And the others, Murphy, Dimmick?" "Everyone but Browning," Kovan interrupted. How could she even begin to explain? But Stone seemed to understand her unspoken words. "You don't have to say it," she said gently. "Any word from Shadow?" "Nothing. The banished have signal jammers all over the fragment. My comms array and AI are fried thanks to a shock rifle hit. All I can manage is short-range comms with the team, and half of the time can't connect. You?" "Same. Long range is completely out, and so is my ID sensor. Sorel and Mako were in the sector last I heard. I managed to make contact a few times." "How?" "These pieces of the crashed fob in the mountains, about 40 kilometers from here," Stone told her. "Never had a chance to deploy before it was shot down. But there's a working comm satellite. Sorel and Mako found it, and have been using it sparingly to reconnect with others. They've rigged it to broadcast a location, pinging by cycling through the digital signal chain. They leave debriefs at sites for whoever shows up. 40 clicks is a long way for a signal to travel. I take it you've been on the move." "Constantly." Kovan knew something about that. They'd been on the move and had covered a lot of terrain themselves. "I've been in the dark since Reverie. Who else made it?" "Vattel, he's out hunting down Griffin. Came across droppings from Jade and Rosado as well, but no real data on their current status. We took a big loss. I'm not sure who made it out beyond that. If your comms are damaged, the others might be too." "Where the hell have you been all this time?" "On the run," Kovan answered. Then hounding the banished, doing the best we can given the circumstances. The fractures in the mountains, everything is spread out, and there's a lot of ground to cover. Makes it slow work. Your armor looks like shit. Kovan's brow rose. Speak for yourself. Your helmet's seen better days, too. Stone studied the dent in the right side. What? Was that a gravity hammer to the side of the head? Something like that. My density regulator is malfunctioning, too, Kovan said reluctantly. The last thing she wanted to do was place additional burdens on her teammate. But at the same time, a malfunction like this was a major liability to the boat crew and needed to be known. She couldn't tell them, but she could tell Stone. It's why Browning ran out and... Don't worry about it, Stone said knowingly. We'll find you a new one, and I'll install it personally. We can't have a stoic freezing up like that in the middle of battle, she said with a smirk. Kovan grabbed her helmet from beneath her arm and turned to lead the way back to camp. Come on, the others will be happy to see you. Not as happy as you, though, right? Stone clapped her on the shoulder. Hey, come on, say it. You missed me. You know you're dying to tell me. Kovan responded with a typical snort and head shake, as if on cue. Stone let out a low chuckle. They'd settled right back into their usual camaraderie, as though no time had passed at all. Back at the camp, the team gathered around Stone, their stunned and relieved faces mirroring what Kovan had felt. Only on a more open scale. She leaned against one of the boulders and watched the reunion as Stone studied the group with shocked expression. You look different. You all look so different. Kovan glanced around the group, trying to see them, as if for the first time since Reverie. They had indeed changed. Long hair, scruffy faces, weathered by the elements, lean, hardened bodies, capable guerrilla fighters through and through. How far they'd all come, and at such a heavy cost. Different, as in, Bender made a muscle with his bicep and slapped it. Holy shit, how the hell did this bad boy get here? Kovan groaned and rolled her eyes. Glad to see some things haven't changed, Stone said with a laugh. As talk turned to the recent banished activity nearby, Kovan found a seat and settled in. They're definitely heading up to the Reverie site, Stone said. And one of those transports is from Escherum's personal fleet. Whether he's actually on it, anyone can guess. If he is, Kovan said. A sudden quiet settled among them. If he is, we need to know, Murphy said. And we need to take him out. Her thoughts exactly. Chapter 25. Outpost Harmonious, Zeta Halo, April 18, 2560, Day 128. Lucas Browning stayed at the back of the banished transport, making himself as invisible as possible. The brute, Idicus, hadn't relayed anything at all when they'd been taken from his cell to the tower and dragged him outside across the tarmac to a phantom drop ship. He'd been shoved aboard the open side bay door and then ushered to the back as it filled with other brutes and elites. The Phantom kept its side doors open, which allowed the air to flow in and blow off the stink of the Geralhani, a small but intensely welcoming gift. As much as he wanted to know where he was going and why, after a cursory inspection, he kept his mouth shut and his head down. After these past several weeks, we knew better. He knew better. It was no longer fear exactly that had been systematically beaten out of him on the daily. It was utter exhaustion that kept him compliant and constantly dulled of any rising fears. He lost a good 30 pounds, if not more. His body was weak, his mind, given the dizzy spell, an emotional outburst. Today, though, his mental state became a little clearer. Just by virtue of being different than all the other days he'd been held captive. He appeared to be the only prisoner on board, and as perhaps being transferred to another prison or about to be used for some other great purpose. If they wanted him dead, it would have already happened by now. At least, that's what he told himself. The flight could have taken 5 minutes or 20, and he wouldn't have noticed. He stopped measuring things as in time, as it only seemed to weigh heavily on him whenever he did. Although it was too packed to see much during the trip, he did glimpse clouds and mountain tops the few times he lifted his head. And as the banished craft began its descent, he noted the change in temperature from balmy to a crisp, arid cool. The elite contingent leapt out before the Phantom's embarking ramp touched down to the ground, followed by the brutes as the craft settled into a low hover. Iticus's giant hand wrapped around Lucas's bicep and gave him a jerk, lifting him onto his feet, but thankfully not hard enough to dislocate his shoulder or worse. During his captivity, he had the misfortune of witnessing the brutes engaging with other human prisoners in horrific games their captors called tossers. The carnage and the screaming that ensued would haunt him until his dying day, which might be any time now. Stars danced in this field of vision, and he blinked rapidly to stave off the approaching dizziness as Iticus hauled him off of the edge of the carriage and threw him onto the ground like a rucksack. Pain erupted in his shoulders and his hips, and his head as it slapped onto the tarmac. Immediately, warmth spread down the side of his face as he pushed himself up, gritting his teeth and trying not to make noise. They paid more attention when you made noise. That was for damn sure. He couldn't wipe the blood away because Iticus now had him by the neck, setting him back on his feet and pushing him along. The banished group that had amassed was the largest gathering he'd seen since the reverie. A crowd of Geralhani, Sanghili, Ungoi, Kikyar, all following towards one central location and drawing his eyes up. Lucas's heart dropped like a stone. It was the mortal revelry. The once proud vessel rose above him, broken, blackened, haunting, but still doggedly there despite the newly created banished outpost in her shadow. Slashes of red enemy war paint branded the outpost and now occupied the entire terrain along the port side of Reverie's hull, filling him with rage and deepening grief. The sight forced him to revisit the terrible memories and sudden death, flashes in the dark, shrieks of pain, endless gunfire, and Gavin. His throat, nose, and eyes were now stinging, but he was too dehydrated to produce a single tear. They just seemed stuck in his throat, choking him in anguish, swelling his chest, and pushing his face until he felt the pressure that made him want to scream. Soon he was stumbling down the ramp and swept along a well-worn path that eventually led into the banished outpost structures near Reverie's stern. Within was a banished command post with a holographic display and readouts, and more banished staring strangely at him. He was ushered down a side corridor that bore deep into the mountain below Reverie, a location the UNSC forces previously had been occupying. To his knowledge, they had never seen. Lucas dared not gawk or keep his head up too long if he wanted to keep it intact. But at the end of the corridor, they entered a large, dimly lit chamber littered by banished excavation equipment. Here, more banished gathered. And when they saw him, they parted to make way. He glanced nervously as dozens of them seemed to fall on him, following his progression farther into the chamber. His pulse kicked up a notch. The hairs on the back of his neck tingled as the gaze was drawn to the right side of the room and the strange yellow glow. He tried to swallow, but he could not. He tried to slow down, but failed to do that either. Iticus kept moving him, with a hand poking in his shoulder. Why did he feel so itchy all of a sudden, as if spiders were crawling all over his skin? Upright against the wall, a large rectangular device with the bizarre humanoid outline was lit with yellow pulsing light. Cables snaked out from the device and into banished power generators and machines, technology that he'd witnessed previously being used to override Forerunner defense systems. Lucas's heartbeat seemed to change and pulse in time with the yellow light. A console sat in front of the device off to one side. A massive Geralhani in a red and gold combat armor turned slowly to gaze at him as he approached. Instinctively, he knew this was a figure of absolute authority. War Chief Esherim himself had to be. The brute's skin was a weathered gray with deep furrows in his brows and along the ridges of his nose, as though in a perpetual scowl. Wispy light gray eyebrows hung over small eyes of differing color, one opaque with a scar slashed from the cheekbone side of Lucas, revealing a row of sharp teeth. Lucas went lightheaded, and his steps grew sluggish, as though he were walking through the mud now. "War Chief," Iticus said from behind him, "here is the human, as you requested." "Bring him to the Silex." Escherum's voice vibrated, the very air going through Lucas like a drum and lighting every nerve. He thought he was done feeling fear, but it rose swift and vibrant as Iticus led him straight to the towering war chief. Yet the massive Geralhani stepped aside smirking as Iticus's immense leathery hand grabbed Lucas's wrist and tugged him towards the console and closer to the Silex. As Escherum called it, Lucas glanced down at the console and then around the assemblage. The alien face was looking back at him, appearing oddly apprehensive. The sight was so strange, he wondered if this was all just some terrible nightmare. Either way, he'd never felt so helpless and alone in his entire life. Escherum gave a faint nod to Iticus. In a swift gesture, the brute grabbed Lucas's hand and slapped it onto the cool, glassy surface of the console. The room seemed to hold its collective breath, but Lucas didn't know why or what was supposed to happen. Suddenly, the surface of the console became cold. Instinctively, he tried to pull away, but the brute held fast to his wrist, the bones starting to give. He wasn't sure what hurt more, the pain in his wrist or the increasingly freezing console. But it became so cold that it burned until he bit so hard on his lip to keep it from crying out that blood burst into his mouth, and he blurted out, "Stop, please stop." No one was even paying attention to him. They were all focused on the Silex, while on the console panel, alien glyphs emerged. Light bled out towards the console and down the cables that ran across the platform and up into the device, activating it. The Silex shifted, alloy parts sliding out and folding away. The thing was now opening. Horror coiled around the chest, and pulse beat widely. For a moment he forgot about the cold freezing in his palm. There was nothing in his training or education to identify what was being revealed. The being within the device. All Lucas could do was stare in awe. It was remarkably tall, with a lithe, mostly humanoid body, adorned with a large triangular headpiece. Nearly all of its form was covered in dark burgundy armor, with plates over its slim shoulders, forearms, hips, and thighs. Its torso was long and tube-like, more insectile than human. The same yellow light that had outlined the creature on the Silex began to glow from two circular insets in the armor, one on the breastplate and another in the center of the triangular headpiece, which curved around two widely spaced, closed eyes and a small mouth. Its hands were bare, each revealing 4 long fingers tipped with claws. As Lucas tried to pull away, the brute held him still. But at least the cold was beginning to recede now, and that the Silex was open. Apprehension lay thick in the chamber. Several seconds passed, and for the briefest of moments Lucas wondered if the creature was dead. But then the head moved from side to side, and its hands opened and closed. "Oh God," he swallowed, and couldn't seem to pull enough air into his lungs. Sweat dripped down from the sides of his face. The eyes popped open, jet black and glassy. An unnerving, bifurcated mouth drew in a slow, sapient grin. The being floated out of the device and swept an imperious gaze around the chamber. Slow, gritty female voice emerged from the body's violet gray face. "Who are you to gather before me?" Lucas wasn't sure how he understood her through his earpiece, but imagined that she spoke in some Forerunner language Oni had reverse engineered already. Her gaze settled on Escherum. "We are the Banished," the war chief answered, his words delivered with strength and precision. We have set you free. The emancipated creature tilted her head at him in mild, momentary curiosity before returning her attention to the surroundings. Banished, she dwelled on the term. I hesitate to believe you understand such a title's true meaning. We know very well who we are. Escharum was firm, but remained curious. Now it's time we know the same of you. I am the Harbinger. Her voice rang out with utter superiority, and she swept another glance around the chamber before settling once more on Escharum. All that you know shall be undone. He stared back, taking stock, and broke the silence with one simple word. Good. It echoed through Lucas with a singular devastation. His legs went weak, and he swayed, snatching his hand from Idicus' lax grip and cradling it to his chest, flexing fingers that ached. He hoped they weren't fractured or frostbitten. His actions caused the Harbinger's gaze to snap to him. Ensnared like helpless prey, he froze, unable to look away. Her head cocked with open curiosity, then a slow smile of recognition tugged at one corner of her mouth, the kind of smile that immediately turned the blood in his veins to ice. This one will be mine. That's it. I'm done for the day. My voice is tired. I've stumbled over the words. Thank you for listening. We're on page 203. Out of, what are we? 203 out of 330? 330. So, we only have 130 pages to go, which I think will be perhaps one, maybe two more episodes of reading for this book. Then, of course, we'll move on to the next one after that. I'm going to catch up on the chat real quick. Holy moly. What do we got? Hey, Woods, how you doing? Tactical Tyler, thanks for stopping by and dropping some emotes. Thanks for following Wildcat315 during the read. Hi, how are you? Hope you're still around and enjoying the awesome. Oh, Kevin had 40,000 points in an hour-long game of Survive the Undead, and it caused his Xbox to crash. That makes me the big sad as well. Sorry about that, buddy. That is, that's a tough one. How are you guys today? Did you enjoy the reading? Hour and 49 minutes. We're a little early. Done a little early. I wasn't going to read another chapter. I was having trouble today. Not as much trouble as last week, but still trouble. We'll continue to get better as the voice improves and things return to more, regularly scheduled fun. We're going to switch over to the Discord here in just a minute and hang out with our friends. We're just waiting on Halo to boot up, and I'm going to go reboot my coffee before we do that as well because, that's how we do. And again, thank you to Installation 00 for being our sound all of the times. Hey, I'm gonna let you guys sit tight here. I'm gonna run into the house and I'm gonna reboot my coffee, and then we're gonna have a blast, some more fun. This is a darker book. It isn't easy reading. It seems like a quick read. I mean, and there is it seems like some of the words are a little bit easier. The vocabulary is easier to read, but I don't know. I also still have Jimmy's. I love to touch bases with people and ask them how they feel about me reading. Everybody obviously comes back to listen, and but I also ask people sometimes, like, how does it sound? What do I sound like? What do you think about when you listen to me read? Do I do a good job enunciating the words? Do I paint the pictures of the buildings and the things for you? What do you think about? Jimmy gave me some feedback. Really makes me grateful I have someone who can read for me. I am a heart rate monitor. Yeah, the heart rate monitor always rides underneath the picture. You see the heart that's burning with no numbers. That is part of my watch. My Apple Watch provides that live data for you while we're playing games, so you can see how hard I'm working when we play. Again, back to the reading. I'm glad.